Hey, everybody. Welcome to our Genealogy and Artificial Intelligence panel. I, for one, am super excited about this. I've been looking forward to it ever since I came up with the idea to have it. And we've got some excellent folks here from the genealogy community who are going to be answering some questions. And if you happen to catch Steve's presentation yesterday about artificial intelligence, it's excellent. It'll be there for 30 days. I know Thomas has one he just did recently, I think. Probably all of you have one up somewhere that people can go and watch. So we're excited that you can join us for some time here. I'm Awen, for self of WikiTree. I have Julie here with me also from WikiTree to help a little bit with the moderating. And so we're just going to start and get to know each of you just a little bit. So maybe just share a little about who you are, what's your AI interest, are there areas that you're really into, how do you kind of get into it? So let's start with Drew.
Okay. Age before beauty, as they say. And some of you may know me from the genealogy guys and the podcast and other activities. But you may not know that my background goes back to IT. My undergraduate degree is basically a computer science degree that I got in the late 70s. And I worked for computer centers at universities until, in fact, the early 1990s. So I was certainly immersed in computer technology. I read everything I could about it. I demonstrated one of the first, probably the first chatbot to faculty at Clemson. You may have heard of Eliza, who was an attempt to see if it could create essentially a Rogerian therapist. And so it was interesting to see the faculty's reaction to that one. But as you can see, I have a long history with computer technology and IT, and that's why I have an interest in artificial intelligence.
Nice. Thomas, how about you?
Hey, Thomas McKenty here. I'm with genealogybargains.com. I was in the law firm IT business from about 1989 until about 2008 when the Great Recession hit. And I saw that those jobs were not coming back. So my main focus is mostly in law firm IT, mostly from training. So that's where I come from. That's why in my business right now, I do a lot of quick guides and cheat sheets. And that's my interest, is easing people in the genealogy community into AI. I did that with social media. And in fact, a lot of the things that we're seeing about AI right now, all the panic and the gnashing of teeth and pulling of hair, is similar to what we went through 15 years ago with social media. And look where everyone is now doing queries and lookups on Facebook. So I'm looking to sort of shepherd people into that and help them understand the benefits and the pitfalls as well.
Nice. And Steve?
I'm Steve Little. I'm the newly appointed AI program director for the National Genealogical Society. And my interests are genealogy, technology, and language. And the genealogy goes back to the 80s when I had an aunt who had done serious scholarship in genealogy in the 60s and 70s. And I had a Commodore 64 and then an IBM PC clone and a DOS version of Family Tree Maker. And she handed me all her stuff and said, "Put it in there, boy." And so I got started then. Like Drew and Thomas, the practical application of my technology interest would be in libraries and law firms. Thomas, I did a 3-year stint as a law librarian, but did 20 years in other kind of libraries, local libraries, community libraries, university libraries. My last job was with the Library of Virginia, the state archival library, the best in the world. I was a photo archivist at that time. I helped local libraries digitize, preserve, and publish online their historic photograph collections. And so I would design and build information systems for law libraries and local libraries. My training's actually in undergraduate in literature, but I started a master's degree in applied linguistics at that time studying computational linguistics and natural language processing, which we knew had a little bit of something to do with artificial intelligence, but that wasn't the center of AI in the 90s. But it has become the center of AI in 2023. So that background in applied linguistics, natural language processing, and computational linguistics has really helped this past year. And so I feel like I've spent the past 40 years getting ready for last year and next year. So it's been an exciting time. It's an honor to be with all of y'all. Drew, I'm having one of those surreal experiences that folks probably admit to. I'm a completist. When I discovered y'all years ago, I went back and listened from episode 1. So hearing you live, normally we're mowing the lawn together. I haven't mowed the lawn without you and George in 5 or 7 years. So it's great to be with you, Thomas. Whenever you talk about the law firm, I have flashbacks.
Excellent. And how about you, Ms. Dana?
Hi, so I'm Dana Leeds, the creator of the Leeds Method, and I'm actually in Houston right now at the FTDNA conference, where I've been talking about artificial intelligence any chance I get. I had a roundtable about it yesterday and had a good group, and we had great discussions. So my background is not in IT and computers. I do have a biology degree. I'm an educator. That I was a public school teacher and then a homeschooler, and then a genealogist for 25 years. So when genetic genealogy and the Leeds method really, for me, it really jump-started my talking career. I got to merge those 3 loves of science, genealogy, and education. And one of my other long-term loves and hobbies is art. And now with DALL-E 3 especially, I mean, the past few weeks, a lot of you have seen my post, and I am just going crazy jumping into the art side and really excited, one, just to learn it in general, but I'm seeing the joy that we can have of sharing our family stories by bringing them to life. And we don't have images of so many of our ancestors and what they were doing and stuff, but we can tell their story and give somebody an image to see and just bring it to life in that way. So I'm very interested in the art side right now. I'm also very interested in where we can go with genetic genealogy and how it can change that part of our world also.
Very cool. Rob.
Hi, I'm Rob Warthin. I'm not used to my Macintosh. I'm actually used to it for once. Everyone knows me. I'm a Windows guy, but I'm actually the developer for DNA GEDCOM. I also work at MITA Y-DNA and one of the co-founders at DNA Adoption. So I'm very deep knowledge of deep history with AI. I got my master's degree concentration in AI from Johns Hopkins back in the 90s. But I was really excited. Back then, it was like you run your programs so they had these models that actually try and figure out how to do things. We'd run models for days and weeks to do calculations for very simple little models and stuff like that. And seeing where people are now and how excited, mainly because the hardware is finally caught up, that you can actually run the hardware and you can do those calculations fast enough. I was telling my son earlier, I was like, this is the first time in my lifetime, and I've been interested in this. I got I got a psychology degree. I almost got a psychology minor because I love the neural networks and the mind, the AI part so much. This is the first time in my lifetime that I've seen where AI can actually be what it really is supposed to be. And I think a lot of it is from the hardware. And now with the excitement, there's so many people excited about it that they're going to push it forward a lot more.
Very cool. I agree. And last but certainly not least is Willie.
Hey folks, I'm Willie. I'm the founder and CEO of Maury. I probably have the most boring background here, which is that I was a math major and then was a programmer and did all of these things and have been sort of immersed in it and immersed in computer science in general and then in artificial intelligence for the last 6 years directly, and then before that probably the last 15. About 20 years ago I spent a lot of time trying to give computers common sense, which was much harder 20 years ago if we had the tools we had now. And I think it's really exciting to sort of live through what is one of these revolutions, right? When we got digital records, when we got DNA, and now we have this tool that we're still trying to figure out how to use it right, you know.
Yeah.
But you can definitely feel the excitement and feel like what the potential of the future holds for us. So it'll be cool.
Excellent. So I think the first question we should ask, I realize it's a loaded one, but what is artificial intelligence? So for people who may not quite understand what it is and what we're talking about today, is there one of you who would kind of like to summarize that?
Well, let me give a historical context and I'll let somebody else give a definition. I mean, again, do you know back in the 1770s, there was this concept because someone created, it was Wolfgang von Kempelen, who was trying to impress the Empress of Austria, Maria Theresa, created the Mechanical Turk, which was a machine claimed to be a robot type device that could play chess and do it fairly well. And this continued until the 1850s when the machine was lost to a fire. Now, his son admitted later, yeah, it was all a hoax. There was some human being embedded in the machine, but it was like any other magician's box where they can do some really clever things to hide people. And my point is that people were even then thinking about what can machines do, you know, in the industrial age and all that. So I guess it was considered possible and people were easily taken in. But my point is that we've had many, many years of people wondering, can computer technology or whatever it was called at the time, can it simulate human intelligence? And I think, and I'll let somebody else if they want to embellish that definition, that we're talking about some kind of computer technology that imitates what humans do as intelligent beings. And I'll stop now.
Someone else want to expand on that a little
I'll
bit?
just jump in. It really is exactly what you said. From most folks, it is something, a computer that acts more like and thinks more like a human does. And so it used to be, we thought we understood how the human brain works. And even back in the 90s, we thought we understood how the human brain works and the neural nets and neurons firing and all that kind of stuff. Is there more to it? I mean, I'm just going to be a little philosophical here, but is there more to that? Our definition, I think, of AI right now is something that builds typically off of neural networks, where you basically have pathways that kind of come together, and then you have some sort of input coming in, and you have some sort of output coming out. That was sort of our definition of AI back then in the 90s. We also had machine vision, where machines can actually watch and look at things and drive things around. A good example would be your Tesla now. And even to some extent, your own car, where is that AI because it's driving itself a little bit, or is it more a definition of a computer making decisions based on inputs, on more simple inputs? For me, AI is a little bit more of that. It's thinking a little bit more for itself. It's taking those inputs, runs it through some sort of neural network, and then there's some sort of outputs at the end. I'm really interested in what Willie thinks, though, because he says he's been.
Yeah, Willie, go for it. Go for it, Willie.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of complex math that goes on underneath the hood, and a lot of like minor revolutions or mini revolutions that we, to be honest, most folks probably don't care about. I think the easiest way to think about like what's happening is it's just really, really advanced pattern recognition. And so when we talk about stuff like ChatGPT or these what are called large language models, you can kind of think of them as like just machines that are really, really good at guessing the next like word or letter, right? That pops out, right? And it turns out that a lot of intelligence, like if you think of what the best writers are, or anyone who's producing the written word, it's you're really just trying to the smallest action is just what's the next word that I can get down on paper, right? And these machines roughly have gotten very, very good at doing that. And so, in the literature realm, it's like, oh, you can write beautiful prose. But if you think perhaps in a scientific or an analytical realm, it's taking a bunch of inputs and what is the next word I can say that will maintain consistency with those inputs, right? And so that's how we get machines that feel like they can analyze something and then produce statements about what's going on in there. They're just really good at that pattern recognition and guessing what the next word should be just over and over and over again.
One approach is to say what it is not.
Yes,
and so I would say, we're not talking like a search and knowledge base. We're beyond that. We're at this phase where we're talking machine learning, and also it's not, Space Odyssey 2001, Dave, I cannot do that, or the takeover of the robots. I think it's not that, but yeah, that's why it's so exciting, because we're just on this cusp of really being able to harness it. For me, it's about connecting the dots between things, because there's so much massive data. I mean, that is not humanly possible. And so I think that's really one of the hottest areas for me, especially with genealogy.
So saying that, Thomas, connecting the dots, doing analysis of a large amount of data, what do you see as the benefits for genealogy? And to follow on that, what are the drawbacks?
Well, one of the biggest things is the fan club concept, friends, associates, and neighbors. I mean, there's a resource that I use, New York Historical Newspapers, run by the Library Consortium, just millions and millions of pages, or take Fulton Postcards, which is another one with 52 million. And if I wanted to know how my great-grandfather, who grew up in Watertown, New York, all the way up near Canada, somehow connected, I was going to say hooked up, connected with my great-grandmother who lived in Manhattan, there might be evidence in there of them attending the same event or being in the same overlapping circles that I can't possibly find right now. I mean, I just can't do it. So that, for me, is one of the biggest things that it's going to help analyze all of that data for me. One of the drawbacks that I think is, and I've broached this subject, is as genealogists, we need to fully disclose when we're using AI-generated content. We need to learn how to cite it. I don't know that we would use it as a source again, but it could be a clue, but I think that we need to be very clear. And I think that I'm hoping that Board for Certification Genealogists or Association of Professional Genealogists or even National Genealogical Society set some ethics around it. That's the one area that, I'm worried about.
I think there's another, I'm sorry, Dana, go ahead. Oh, okay. I was just going to say, I think there is another drawback potentially that's true of every computer technology. When calculators were invented and particularly brought into the schools, there was a concern that, well, children won't learn how to do math. They won't need to know because they can just punch the buttons on the calculator. And then when people got spell check, well, then nobody needs to know how to spell anything because spell check will do it for them. And when we started using Grammarly, which, my gosh, I depend so heavily on Grammarly to catch things and whatever, is we won't have to learn how to write because it'll basically fix whatever mess we don't have to develop our skills. I think a possible concern is, if genealogists look at this technology as, I don't have to learn how to be a genealogist. I don't have to learn how to do analysis. I don't have to learn how to read old handwriting or any of the other skills that we have depended on, because the software, the technology, the AI will do it for me. Yeah, that's something we have to be careful about and concerned about, that it doesn't lead to people just throwing up their hands and going, oh, some machine will do it for me. I don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, so I was going to say one of the benefits I see and where I see it really helping. I've been watching a lady, Carol McCulloch. I hope I'm saying her name right, but she goes by Coach Carol. And I think she's the one that I first heard called a genealogy assistant. So I don't really see, maybe we'll be able to someday say, help me find records that might be related to a specific ancestor. But what I really see in the near future is it taking the time. If I could hire an assistant and have them sitting next to me and say, okay, I need you to do this. I need you to transcribe this. I need you to pull out this information. I need you to make a spreadsheet. Tell me how to make this spreadsheet. So all those things that I could hire somebody to sit next to me, but it's sitting right there in my computer. And that to me is the nearest thing that I think we're going to really be able to see a big difference in. And the big thing I see as a warning right now is people trusting it as if it were Google, or, and asking it a question, even asking it to transcribe something, and then just trusting what they see. Billy was talking about it's really just trying to come up with that next word, and it's predictive. So one of the examples I used, I had fed it fed ChatGPT a affidavit from a pension file. And on the very first time when it had the county, it misread the county, and it said it was Lancaster County instead of Clarion County. Well, the county came up later, and it just again filled in Lancaster. And I believe it was just predicting. It was like, oh, we're talking about Lancaster County, so that's where we're at. So it didn't read it. And when I zeroed in and just said, now just read this one line to me, it got it perfect, even though it had really messed things up. So that's to me right now the biggest warning, that is people just trusting what they see instead of using their own. We have to then go back and use our own minds and really check out what we see.
Yeah, it can't replace our own brains.
To kind of jump
Critical
on what
thinking.
that those said was we had the AI meeting that Dana had. We discussed a lot of the students are actually going to start using. They're going to grow up with this, so you do have to start thinking about. I had a calculator in 8th grade back in the 80s, and they thought that was just the worst thing in the world. But they finally said, they're going to have a calculator the rest of their lives. Yes, when you're between 1st and 5th grade or so, you do need to learn to add and subtract. But why did we have to slow down people just to do those things? So having these tools are very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you guys think
it won't be the case right now? You largely feel like if you want to use one of these large language models, you have to go to OpenAI or Anthropic or Perplexity or Bard, but those days are coming to an end already. These large language models are going to be baked into your word processor, built into your spreadsheet. They're going to be there without you having to go to use them. So I agree with Thomas. We should be acknowledging when we use them for certain tasks. You don't put WordPerfect as your co-author, Thomas, when you write an article. So there's going to be some lines somewhere. When is disclosure necessary? Because you can use ChatGPT. Drew, I canceled my Grammarly subscription, but I haven't closed my account. You no longer have to pay for Grammarly. The large language models will do a lot of that, but don't close your Grammarly account because they're not perfect either. They have averaged out all punctuation for the last 4,000 years. So they'll give you an average of what the punctuation should look like. But if you need to adhere to MLA or APA or evidence explained, if you have a style manual, you still need to do those finishing touches yourself. So lots to play with and lots to explore and figure out where we're going from here. I really appreciated Thomas's. I actually went back and listened to last year's episode of when you were talking about the future. And Thomas was talking about artificial intelligence being used for transcription and the fan club last year. And I'm doing it now. Can I share a screen briefly?
Yeah, absolutely.
This is a slide I showed yesterday, but this is a chart that, let me see. Here we go. This is a cluster diagram. This is one of Thomas, when Thomas is talking about the friends, associates, and neighbors. There's a version, a flavor of ChatGPT, one of their beta modes. It's now called Advanced Data Analysis, but it used to be called Code Interpreter. I gave it a chunk of a Roots Magic database. This is a cemetery that I work with. And so I exported just a portion of my Roots Magic database as a MySQL file. And I was able to upload the tables from the MySQL file and ask Code Interpreter to give me a useful interpretation of the data. I did not ask it for a cluster diagram, but it saw what was in the database, and this is a true and accurate representation. It took the export from a Roots Magic database and created a fan chart, drawing together some of the associations that I may or may not have caught, but it made very clear and explicit what was going on there. And
one question, Steve. Now, those clusters are not geographical on the
no,
cemetery.
they're relational.
What if you were to plot the GPS location points and draw different color lines?
You could have added a column. You could have, and Willie, this is going to pop up on your website next week, but I could have added a column. I've got all the GPS coordinates. If I'd have just added another column, that would have showed up right underneath the names. So yeah, you can see how real quickly this stuff is going to.
Because you could see that there were maybe some family battles if someone's not buried next to everyone else in the family, or whatever. So that would be really a good feature. Yeah.
Yeah. And you'll be able to do that not just with the Roots Magic file, but imagine you had the newspaper archives from Mayberry, Andy Griffith. You could drop in the newspaper archives and ask it to, start to organize this newspaper archive, go through and identify and extract the names where there's an explicitly identified relationship in the article, make a note of that explicitly identified relationship, and then just start processing a newspaper archive for a small town. It's going to be mind-blowing.
Wow. Yes.
I wanted, Eowyn, just for a minute, I want to talk about how fast this technology is moving, because I think, please. This is just incredible. We haven't even reached 1 year since ChatGPT has been released.
Yeah.
And early on, now I retired from my academic library job back in August, but back at the beginning of the year, I started hearing about, reading about, or even at the end of 2022, about ChatGPT. And I went to my boss and his boss. He had just started, and I said, we as librarians need to talk about this. And he came back after having talked and said, well, she wants to do that later, like in the summer. I said, we cannot wait for the summer. We need to talk about it now. And fortunately, there were other people at the university in the unit where the unit that helps faculty teach, who were already pulling together people to say, how do we address this? How do we redesign assignments? How do we deal with all this stuff? So, it was moving incredibly fast. And even I think my boss and my boss's boss realized this. I wanted to share a little bit of tidbit that I think the viewers will really much enjoy. And it'll be interesting to see how many on the panel know this. I'm pretty sure you all do, or many of you do. Back in 1987, Apple came out with a concept device called the Knowledge Navigator. I'm seeing some nods here from a few people. This was basically like a tablet that folded out on your desk, and you interacted with it. And it showed this 8-minute video, showed some very annoying faculty member who was supposed to teach, and he's interacting. And it was really amazing, the interaction. He was interacting with an avatar of an assistant who was talking to him, helping him, doing communication, doing all the things this professor needed to make his life a little easier. And I want to quote something from a website from 2011 that was published about how people reacted to this concept. And they said, the astute bow tie wearing software agent in the video has been the center of quite a few heated discussions in the domain of human computer interaction. It was criticized as being an unrealistic portrayal of the capacities of any software agent in the foreseeable future or even in a distant future. And I'm thinking, no, we're kind of there. If you watch the video, we almost have every single thing that's in that video could be done today with the technology.
Sounds like Bill Gates saying no one will need anything more than 5 megabytes.
Yeah, kind of like that. But at least Apple was ahead of the game on that particular tool. And I just want to say, I know we're talking almost 50 years since then, but that's not the point. The point is things are moving now at such a rapid pace that even all of us on the panel are probably struggling just to keep up with all the new discoveries and the new applications, which is fun and great, but it's not like the time it took for computer technology to be adopted by genealogists, for the World Wide Web to be adopted. All those things, DNA even, took time.
Yeah.
And this is not moving at that speed. This is moving 100 times faster than that, which is why I'm glad you have the panel, because we got to be ready for this, because in a year from now, it's going to be even more astounding as to what it's doing. So
I can't even imagine a year from now what there will be. So
about even like in the genetic genealogy world, if I want to make a presentation 6 months out, if I can't, it's hard to do that. And you're going to have to change slides, and something new and amazing is going to come up, and you're going to want to start over. So if people are trying to ask me, what could I do a year from now? I have no idea, because I don't know. But in this world, I mean, if they ask you to do something a month from now, we're going to have to, it's just moving so fast. It's hard to know what's going to be upcoming and when. So.
Yeah, I'm teaching AI and genealogy for Roots Tech, and I'm going to do last minute, submit my materials. I mean, what can I do? And even that is a 2 to 3 month gap. And so, yeah.
I think one of the things I appreciate that so much about this that probably doesn't get articulated enough is we often have these panel discussions under the rubric of technology. And that probably is where it best belongs. But this is going to appeal to a group of folks who have been probably felt left out for far too long. Much of the past 50 years that Drew has been talking about has belonged to the STEM people, science, technology. This is going to be a little bit of the return of the English major. If you have a degree in language or linguistics, you are going to be endued with superpowers. Some of the smartest people in the technology field are honestly saying now this isn't going to threaten Rob or Willie or anybody who actually does this for your day job, or you're in the corner office already. But one of the most powerful programming languages is going to become your natural English speaking voice, so that you're going to be able to talk in plain English to these devices, and they're going to go write the little program for you that accomplishes the little task that Dana was talking about. Now, we're not talking about, it's not going to replace Roots Magic or Mori or Family Tree Maker or anything else. We're not going to solve driverless cars or cancer. But if you have a stack of unscanned birth certificates and death certificates, and you want to process a couple thousand documents, these are the small kinds of simple scripts that you're going to be able to, if you ever took a Fortran or a Pascal or a basic class, if you have just enough knowledge to be able to get on the screen, hello world, which is what they teach you on your first day of a basic class. I can see Rob and Willie are both going, no. Y'all guys are not threatened. There's still going to be
cards. Was that punch cards or not?
There's still plenty of room for real programmers, but folks with any interest in simple scripts or just doing some automation that's going to make your life easier, the English majors are going to have a moment where if you can articulate a task, you're going to be able to have an assistant, as Dana described, that's going to do some of these tasks for you. And I know we've been talking, I went back and looked at several of these talks that you've done over the years, the future of genealogy, and automation always comes up. But now you're really going to see how the automation, those promises, start to be fulfilled in a very real way.
Willie, did you have something?
Yeah, I was going to say that there are multiple ways to view these models, and we've been having a lot of discussions around. I'll take Thomas's tack, which is what doesn't change, right? In the world, and there's always going to be the necessary need for judgment. Right, these tools, no matter how powerful they are, there's always going to be a last layer or a last step, which involves like saying, is this right? And that from in many domains, that is not something a model is ever going to do. But one of the ways to think about, these AI models, I know I represented before as like, oh, well, does the prediction pattern recognition. They're also incredibly good at transmuting one form of data into another form of data. So as Steve was saying, right now, if I want to talk and I want to describe something I want to exist in the digital and ultimately physical world, it's very hard, right? I can talk, and you can talk to a programmer who builds a program, and the program runs and does it, and eventually something, a nice little website gets spit out on the other side. Those days are rapidly shrinking, right? Very, very soon we'll be able to transmute voice into code, or voice into things printed via 3D printers, right? But it's also very great at transmuting digital images into text, digital images into audio. Like all of these data forms are actually going to get the distance between one form and another is going to be shrunken via these models. And it's going to be really interesting when that world comes about, and it's coming about, as we've all mentioned, like very rapidly, because we'll start to notice that all of the not the hard work or the grunge work or whatnot, but that work in time terms is going to shrink, and what's going to remain is the judgment time, right? How do we then become more and more confident in that last step, which is, does everything that pops out of what I said, is it correct? And it's going to take, we're going to have to learn, we've been flexing that muscle, but it's going to be more and more important as the technology gets better for the judgment muscle to get stronger.
I want to say, I think as an assistant, I'm going to go back to something Steve showed for us and Thomas commented on about GPS. I mean, one of the things that some of our genealogy software has done for us for a while is it catches basically typos or really kind of beginner mistakes of saying, well, this child was born after his mother died, or, things of that nature where we just probably caused it by a typo, most likely. I think AI can actually look at our entire database and point things beyond that are probably mistakes, and to say, well, you've got these children born in this country, but their parents were always in this other country or this other US state. And that's even a little bit beyond what I've seen most of the current software do. But I think that's where this could go, to say you've got some issues to look at and to address and deal with. Find gaps in your research, certainly that, and also to make suggestions. But I think that's a level where it would even be better than what we've got now, where, yeah, we can find those really obvious mistakes, but I can see where it'd be really beneficial to just see, does this even make sense, this family tree that we've got here, or is it just some serious issues here?
One thing I'd love it to do, Drew, is, right now when on the software you put in the county, and it tends to be the current county. Look at the date of the data point that I'm working with, damn it, and give me the historical county.
Absolutely.
And that would, that would be great.
We need a database. Yeah, all the programs need that historical database of where things were, not just where they are now. Yes, because again, we know that is where the records are, for that time, for those events. And so we've got which actually goes into something interesting here that we haven't dealt with too much. AI is only good as the data it works from. If we don't give it access to like those historical events of county creation and name changes and all those other things, then it's going to give us gibberish in some cases. It's going to give us hallucinations because it doesn't know any better. It can only give us back what we give it. So we're going to have to improve the quality of our geographic data and the other things that we currently have.
And going back to what you were saying earlier, Drew, about the looking at your data and seeing somebody born before or not, that was always something previously a programmer like myself would have to put into the computer and say, okay, look for this, look for that, look for this. If we teach it, give those patterns of good trees and things like, okay, well, you said you're in Frederick County, but actually Emmitsburg and Frederick County, well, that was in Carroll County back then. So you should fix that. If you put those in, you don't have somebody like me programming it. The AI can learn the patterns and learn the things and come up with things that we don't even think about in the first place. That's the power.
Definitely. So I had sent you guys a list of questions that we might go through, but we've had quite a few come up in the chat. Are you guys good if we go through those instead?
Yeah.
Since they're here and watching. The first, I'm going to go to you, Willie, because we had a few people ask what Maury is. Do you want to just share a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. I don't want to talk too much about myself, but Maury is a new tree building application. Our favorite. It has sort of built-in stuff around, transcribing and translating stuff inside the media gallery. So if you're looking for, like, I have a document, I'd love to have text out of the document, and you can just dump it in the media gallery and it's built in there. You don't have to kind of go to an external site for doing that. We also have a lot of tools around multiplayer. So if you're working with other people on your tree, you can do it live on the same screen. You're not of on the phone, talking with mom and trying to figure out which Thomas Lee is the one you're looking at. And we also have a place called Super Genealogy where we do a lot of our AI R&D research, and we post stuff there. So
very cool. All right, so Murray asked, how does AI relate to the semantic web?
Well, in a way, at least for me, I was building semantic wikis at one point using the Media Wiki platform for these historical newspapers, but it takes a lot of manual markup. So now what's going to happen is, I think, is it takes that task out of it. I don't know. That's the perspective I see. I mean, what do others think? Is it really just an offshoot, or is it a later development of semantic web? Or
I got to kind of come up at a time when the semantic web was the new hot thing. And one of the issues was always sort of as we talked about before, around sort of language and code are different, right? And one of the struggles was, especially in the 90s and early 2000s, everything on the web was code. Right, and what we realized, and to produce, you wrote code to produce code, and that was the vast majority of the internet. And everyone sort of understood that there was meaning locked within that code, right, on the websites and what was happening. And Google starting out was not really a machine for understanding it. It was just a machine for understanding popularity. And so it was just looking at what everyone else looked at and said, okay, that's probably the thing you're searching for when you type a query to Google. And AI, by being this transmutation engine, is actually sort of like the philosophical descendant of what the semantic web wanted to be, because it means that it's like code and content no longer are so different, and we can search over both of them using the exact same tool. And so now when we think about looking at the internet, we can look at the content of each page and understand, ask questions of it, right? Something that's actually very, very hard for a simple search engine to do.
Anybody else want to comment on the semantic web? No? Okay. So this one, would love to see AI restore photos by reviewing multiple images of an individual to fix destroyed or cut off images, or to identify family members in group photos. Is there anything like that there now or coming, or that you're aware of?
Well, I'll just say that a few years ago, a group approached me. They wanted to take the technology that the U.S. Army was using in Afghanistan. They were scanning images of Afghan rebels, and everything is clan-based, family-based. So they were looking for characteristics in terms of nose and eyes and everything. And they wanted to apply that to trying to identify, with a vast database of photographs, who might be related, So I do think that that's possible. We're not there yet right now, I don't think, in terms of facial characteristics, either to fill in the gaps and create a person, or to actually match up. I mean, but it's been around for a while, but I think AI is going to accelerate this concept.
Yeah, so I would, when he talked about cut off images. So again, yeah, I don't see this happening right now, but I first was seeing this on Canva. So Canva is, I think you probably know what Canva is, but they have a tool called Magic something, where if you've created some image or you've even feeded a photo, it wants to fill it in. And so you just have this close up of like my face, but you can see some stuff behind me, the hotel room, and you can ask it to expand it. And it's not doing a great job. I watched a video, I haven't tried it myself, but a lady trying it, and it didn't do a great job, but I'm sure it'll get better and better. But the other thing I've tried with DALL-E 3 on ChatGPT is, so most of the images we get are square. But if you say you want to see a wide version instead, so you've got, let's say, a giraffe, and you're like, I want to see it wide, it widens it, and it automatically, it's wonderful. It creates more, whether you've got a image as a photograph, it's something it generated, but it's able to do that. So I'm very sure this is something that will happen as far as being able to fill and cut off images. So just wanted to share that.
We can do that now. Midjourney's been doing it for a while, and Adobe came out with a beta version with their AI built into it. And Adobe is taking the lead on being the most ethical of the image generating AIs. They have only trained their data on, they did not publicly scrape the website for their training data. They use licensed content as their training data, and they're paying their creators of their training data. And the beta tool that they put out will extend those images now, so that if you have an image that's cut off, it'll guess, it may not get it right, and it'll ask you, you can type in and modify how the extension of the canvas should be done. So if you wanted to describe what should be filled in, the missing part, you can do that now. As for the facial recognition, I suspect it's already doable, but I don't know if we want to be able to go there. OpenAI announced that they would be accepting images in March, and we've been able to do that for the last month. Part of the delay was many folks suspect the facial recognition was far better than they had even anticipated. And we think of facial recognition as a good thing. We want to know who that unidentified person is from the family relationship. But there's a dark and evil side to facial recognition too. And so we may not ever get access to the powerful facial recognition that we may want as genealogists. But the world may be better for us being denied that, because I don't know if you want every, that robust level of facial recognition to be available freely to everybody. And so I'm okay that if you you can upload an image to ChatGPT right now, and it can be a picture of a famous public figure, and it may or may not decide to identify the people. If you ask it to start identifying the people in a photograph, and you know they should get it, say it's famous movie stars, say you took a picture at the red carpet at the Oscars, and these are public people at a public event, you should be able to recognize them. It will, right now they've set the guardrails so high, appropriately I think, to disable that robust level of facial recognition. So but on the other hand, there's genealogy companies. There were companies at Richmond for NGS who claim to be able to, you give them a folder of photographs and it'll make an attempt to identify who folks are in the same way that already your Google Photos does, and other things. They'll identify the people in your photograph.
Awesome. Okay. Yuka says, at the moment, AI is a bit like human savants that is very good at specialized subjects like chess, but limited outside of that. Do you expect more generalized AI will be developed in the future?
Can I comment on that one?
Yes.
Only because I just read about it and I clipped the article. There was an article that the co-founder of the Google's DeepMind AI lab said that by 2028, AI will have a 50-50 shot of being as smart as humans, and basically announced very recently that this person's still standing by that in 5 years we will have what's called sometimes AGI, the idea of this generalized intelligence. So, I mean, that's what the people at the top are saying. Now, are they saying it for investment money? Or are they saying it for something else? I don't know.
Well,
but I just want to say that there are people who thinks that it's coming really darn soon. And we already know, what we've seen in the last year. What do we think we're going to, again, 5 years from now? Wow. It's very possible.
The biggest thing is there's so many different types of models out there. And once AI learns to know what the best model is to do something, to figure out the right way to go, or even figure out the right plugins, because there's different things. There's sometimes where, like, you want to build out a tree, and there's already a tree out at WikiTree. Does it know to go out to WikiTree and get that information? Does it then source that information? How does it know where to go to get pieces of information? If you have plugins for Ancestry, plugins for WikiTree, plugins for, and you teach, it's not even you teaching anymore. AI is learning on itself how to go and find the information and do the pieces. That's where I think we're at that sort of that crescent. And that's what I was telling my son. It's like, we're at that crescent. We're just starting to curve up. Now, are we going to curve up and angle off? I don't think so. I think this is actually the time where machines are going to take over. Where AI is actually going to get smart enough, because there's enough interest in it. There's going to be enough research money and enough money and pieces in this that you're going to build models, and there's going to be enough people trying these things. And the hardware is just frankly right there. I looked at the Apple M3 hardware. I think it was like 30% of the hardware on the Apple M3 is AI-based hardware, where it's doing calculations and stuff. We've always had AI in our phones for a long time. It's already been doing some massaging. It listens to us, and so that's an AI piece. Our phones here, our simple little phones here, are going to turn into little AI systems, and they're going to have more power than I did. Well, they already have more power than I did back in the 90s doing AI. Just imagine if they start really concentrating on the hardware. So 5 years is not 50-50. I actually agree with that.
Can I wanted to go off on a little bit of a tangent, if it's okay.
Go ahead.
And this relates particularly to WikiTree and its concept. Because if somebody said this earlier, I apologize if you said it and I zoned out and missed it. But what I think one of the benefits of AI can very well be is to facilitate collaboration. And again, that's, obviously that's what WikiTree is all about. I mean, that's one of the big parts. But what if there is AI that can assist us? Yes, I know that, it can, these online things already telling us, well, these other people have these same people in their trees and whatever, but I'm talking about a little bit more sophisticated than that. Are there other people out there besides me who are researching the same questions, who are working on the same family lines actively? Because sometimes you find somebody that's got somebody in their tree and I'm like, yeah, that's my in-laws, and I just put that out there, but I don't know anything else about them, and they don't care. So I see where AI could, again, if it had access to the data, like what's in WikiTree, but other places, to go out there and say, guess what? You should talk to this person, because you and them could join together and work on this research problem. And I think that would be a wonderful application of AI to do things. In that Knowledge Navigator video, even though the guy is this supercilious faculty professor who waited till the last possible minute to put together his course, his lecture for the afternoon, he actually talks to his AI agent about, I think my friend so-and-so's researching this. And the agent actually goes out there, finds that she has published this article and puts the two of them in touch with each other, and they can collaborate on this presentation. So I think that's the same thing. I think that's what WikiTreeers should get really excited about, is that it can help in pulling people together who should be working together.
So we're talking sort of like a Tinder for AI genealogy.
Tinder for AI.
If you want to go there, Thomas. Yeah, I'll create my profile. It will be a little different than that.
Right. Now, one thing I do want to mention, though, I would love to see this. I would love to see Family Search use AI to stop stupidity. When people put something right on your tree, sort of like a poison pill, that's not actually, it's just not possible. But the thing is, this is why I love WikiTree, because it's permission-based merging. But it would be great if AI could go and say, you know, that's just crazy talk. That's not going. That doesn't prove anything. Yeah.
Yeah, there's certainly really obvious situations where it seems like AI would be able to just stop those things from happening. Any other comments on that? We'll bring up the next question. This is from Reg. Where does ChatGPT-4 get its source information or database input from, which to statistically predict the next most likely word to follow a previous word?
Yeah, I can. I don't know if the info on ChatGPT-4 is out there, but the previous ones, back when OpenAI was a little bit more open, they used to list where the source information came from. And so everything, if you dig a little bit deeper into the large language model world, everyone talks about tokens rather than sort of words or characters. And there, for a long time, there have been open data sets. Common Crawl is one of them, which is an open source common crawl of the entire internet. I can't remember most of the other ones. I think Common Crawl represents, we'll call it 25 to 33% of where ChatGPT scans. But the real future that we're looking at now is, where does GPT-5 get its information from, right? Because we start to see, and everyone's noticing how valuable their data sets are, right? So you can feel the competition heating up. You have Reddit closing off their APIs and their data because they were one of the data sources for the early crawls that they no longer want to be open. You see Twitter closing off its API and releasing Grok. I think it was just today, which is their own AI. And we're going to a world which is unfortunately a little bit more closed off than it was before. And this walling up is going to lead to a different internet than we've had over the last 20 years or so. And is also going to change our access patterns. But yeah, just for that specific one, I wish I could pull up the article on top of my head, but there's a set of data sources they use.
I want to say that
there was a really great Washington. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say fairly short. The closed off thing is a big concern of mine, because I know I like using smart homes. So I have smart this, smart that, and I got my Apple, and I got my my Android, and I got my Alexa. That luckily Alexa's not here; it's not going to talk on me. But sorry to everybody who's Alexa's talking off. But you got all these closed systems, and they don't combine together and stuff. And that's going to be the sad thing. That's going to very much be the sad thing about that, is if they start closing these things off. So you're going to have to figure out which the best AI to use to do your tool, when really, if they were integrated together, they'd be able to figure out the best AI in the first place.
Steve, did you
Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Steve.
Oh, no.
I had was just looking. I remember there was a really good article. The Washington Post did a profile, talking about where did OpenAI get their training data, and I think it was there's an April 19th article. That may have been the one, but it may have been a little older than that. It may have gone back to December, but I know the Washington Post did a really good deep dive into the training data, because they were talking about how many billions and trillions of parameters and tokens, and everybody's eyes just glazed over. But they then did a very accessible, this is where it's coming from. And there were some nice bar graphs that showed percentages of stuff. Again, like Willie said, that's not going to be the same place that GPT-5 comes from. but there's a little bit of information about 3 and 3.5 and 4.
Willie, did you have something else? No? Good. Any other thoughts on GPT-4 and its data bank input? All right. So Christine McLeod asks, will AI redefine the reasonably exhaustive search?
Well, I guess it will include things that were not previously included. Anytime, I mean, look at what we've done with computer technology already to digitize things. I mean, when I've asked the people that came up with these concepts of reasonably exhaustive or whatever term you want to use, what if the person is said, well, I can't afford to travel to that courthouse. I can't afford to go to that country. I can't, are they doing reasonable searches within their budgets? Does that mean inside their budget, and the time they have available to do it? So I think there are always interpretations of what this means. It has to mean to a degree what you can afford to do, what you have time to do, what is practical to do, and how much. And so if we now have AI and it's available to us without breaking our budgets and doing certain other things, then I think it requires incorporating what it can provide for us, even though, as we've hopefully gone into in some detail, you have to evaluate what it gives you. You can't simply trust it. So I would say it doesn't so much redefine it. It simply means there's yet another source of information that we need to include, just as, by the way, I'm pretty sure it now includes a reasonably exhaustive search, includes DNA and looking at your DNA matches and all those things, which obviously it did not used to do, but now it does. And I think this is going to be one of the same things. But again, you're going to have to have the skills to use it. And that's also part of a reasonably exhaustive search, is how much time and energy do you have to develop the skills you need to obtain this information and interpret this information. So like DNA, I think we are going to have to include that in the scope of what's a reasonably exhaustive search.
I'm sorry. I'm gonna. I don't know if clarify is the right word, but I believe what it says is that if you are trying to say it's a biological relationship, that we often use DNA. I don't think it's ever required, and a lot of researchers' questions, of course, don't have DNA involved. Or you can just talk about the father, but you're not saying it's biological because you don't know, so you don't have to use DNA. But I agree with Thomas about, I don't think it would redefine it. It's like he said, it's just another tool you can use, and it's not making new records. It might help us find records at some point in the future. So definitely, if it gets to that point and it can say, okay, I want to find records about my John Smith who was born in 1770, and if it can help me find records, there's a great place to go. But we would never, I don't think, be required to use AI, at least as I see it today.
Actually, it's probably, it is so poor right now as a research tool. You wouldn't want to use it the same way you do traditional research. It would generate so many false leads that you would never be able to finish a reasonable, if you tried to run down every hallucination that it could possibly generate for you, you could generate 1,000 hallucinated false leads in seconds. So if you're even using it to do research, looking for names, dates, places, events, relationships, that's not something that you should be using it for today. We may get there. It may help you come up with strategies on what library do I need to go to find this name, date, place, relationship, or event. But if you're asking it to name your third great grandfather and give me a list of possibilities, you're going to get 999 hallucinated plausible answers that you're going to have to run down. And that's just a terribly inefficient use of your time.
Yeah, and I totally agree with, and I was going to say, it might help us find other records, but again, the amount of things you have to wade through, and much better resources are like the Family Search Wiki or Cindy's List, or going someplace that will give you that list of records, or the little booklets like I guess NGS puts out and stuff. So that's a much better use of your time. And I don't see it anytime soon as actually helping me figure out who John Smith's father is. So.
Yeah, I wanted to mention something about Dana said, well, it won't create records. One thing that could happen is a deep fake of the 1890 census. The forms are out there. The codes are out there. Someone could dump the city directory information, correct? And it is feasible that someone could create deep fakes of the missing 1890 U.S. federal census.
That's very interesting.
So a newbie might not know that the 1890 census was lost to fire and flood, you know? And
Yeah.
so that's one of those things, you know, and yeah.
And I can also just imagine, again, thinking newbies and people who are trying to use it as Google. And if it got to the point, it was just giving you images and you're saying, okay, I'm trying to find it. And it could say, look, I found the birth record. And it would just give you an image.
Oh, no.
And somebody's like, oh boy. And then they start spreading it and posting it on trees. Oh my gosh, what a mess.
Oh, goodness.
And then that's the source in the first place. It's like, from that person, yeah. It's ironic. Here we are using AI to help us with the genealogy, and AI is then breaking it.
Yeah, very true. Any other comments on the exhaustive searching? So Brenda asks, what responsibility does the user of AI have to the genealogy community as far as ethics and reporting when you use it in your writing or on blogs?
I'll get started on that. That's part of what I've been tasked to start leading efforts on from the National Genealogical Society, is to begin these discussions. And I always start by cautioning against extremism. There's two issues at stake. What can we use it for, and when do we need to disclose it? And you need to avoid extremism in both of those cases. By default, we're already at one extreme. There are no rules, ethics, or guidelines specifically related to artificial intelligence and genealogy right now. There's existing rules, ethics, and guidelines in genealogy and in being a citizen of a state and a nation. But as for how it's going to be specifically applied in genealogy, right now it's the Wild West, and everybody is calling their own shots. And some folks will decide to do one thing and others another. And it's your house, your rules right now. So if you work for somebody, your boss is going to tell you what the rules are for our house. If you own a small genealogy firm and you hire contractors, then you set the rules for your organization. This is going to impact the lives of editors first, unwillingly. Everybody who's enjoying AI genealogy right now are willing participants. The editors of your newsletters, journals, and magazines are going to become unwilling participants in this discussion, because they're going to start to be receiving articles and submissions that they may have questions about this. And right now, there is no rules. And the danger is that they'll just jump from one extreme to the other. On the one hand, the one extreme is complete laissez-faire, no holds barred, anything goes. The other extreme is just as dangerous, although it may not be obvious, and that's a complete prohibition. And a complete prohibition is also a dead end, and you don't want to go there, because you're going to turn all your clients, users, readers, writers into criminals, because they're going to use it and they're not going to be able to avoid using it. So the middle ground, at least on use, this is a starting place. This is not where we will probably end up. But my rule of thumb is this. For lack of a better name, the horrible name is the human test regarding use. If your boss says you've got to do this, I'm paying you to do it, and only you, then only you can do it. You can't use ChatGPT to do something your boss has said, we don't do that here. If your accrediting or certifying or professional organization says during this evaluation, we need to see only your work, and you're not allowed to have a human proofread this. We want to see your writing without a human proofreader. Then you can't have Grammarly or ChatGPT look at it. If you do, you'll have to decide what then are those rules of disclosure. Are you going to have to say I used Grammarly or ChatGPT to do the editing on this? And where does that? It's going to be a sticky wicket, because you can use ChatGPT to rewrite a bad draft, and then that's a co-writer, it's a co-author. If you ask it to rewrite a bad draft, it's now your co-author. But if you ask it to give me a list of 10 things I could do to improve this draft, and then you go through the list of 10 suggestions, that's not a co-writer. That's an editor. And editors don't get listed as a byline beside the author. Editors get listed on the masthead on the first or second page. So it's going to be a discussion
and it carries
about
over, Steve,
where to draw the lines.
Yes, Steve, it carries over to call for presentations as well. And I will point out that AI detectors are notoriously inaccurate.
Yes.
I mean, given someone like me, I have a lot of public information out there. I have it out there. It's going to say everything that I submit is AI generated. It's going to reject it. So that's
AI generators are trash.
They are.
We do not rely on AI generators.
No,
the only people selling AI generators are the people who are making them,
detectors.
The detectors. And the school administrators who want to, they wish that they worked, but the school administrators are buying these things, and they're falsely accusing students of using AI. And the good students will use the AI and never get caught.
We actually notified, we had several workshops for faculty at the University of South Florida that discussed some of that, including how unreliable, completely unreliable these are, so that they cannot really tell a student your stuff's not acceptable, it was done by AI, because they are so bad. They're going to have to redesign their assignments if that's the issue. I should also add, we've got a copyright issue involved in all of what we're talking about here, because the federal courts have already said AI generated artwork will not qualify for copyright. I promise, I assume you're agreeing with that, or But I think that will apply to literature. I think that will apply to articles to a certain degree if it's completely written by AI. And if you're submitting to a publisher, a book publisher, a journal publisher, where you're claiming, because part of the contract usually has something in there that this is your work, it's copyrightable either by you or the publisher or the journal, you've got a problem. And I think that's where it's going to be, again, where does that fall? Steve, where's the line? And now, earlier in this year, back in the early summer, I was asked to speak on a panel at the joint meeting of the Florida State Genealogical Society and the Florida Historical Society on what are the technology trends for genealogy. And we already had somebody on the panel talking about DNA, so that was off topic for me. So I had to come up with everything else. I actually asked ChatGPT, what are the technology trends for genealogy, and it gave me a very well written bulleted list. Now, I deleted the bullet about DNA because it came up with one, and I deleted a bullet for something else. I used that for brainstorming because I was trying to think about, and then of course I did my own slides and I did my own text. But I copied that text from what it gave me, except for the DNA thing and one other thing, and put it up on the screen, because when I was talking about AI, I said, I want y'all to see what it wrote when I asked this question and how well written it was. There was no factual errors. All of it was very well written, to kind of say to the audience, do you realize that's where we are right now? And I mean, again, I see nothing wrong as a writer to use it to help me brainstorm, but I'm going to write the text. I'm not going to take what it says. I'm just going to use it for the ideas.
This is why Amazon recently, they put a limit of 3 ebook creation on Kindle KDP a day, 3 a day, because people were doing these travel guides, which were sending people the wrong direction.
Oh,
And
no.
so they have a limit now to do that. And getting into copyright, I wanted to maybe segue into that. You do know that the U.S. Copyright Office has been taking public comments on copyright, and there are very interesting ones coming in from the OpenAI and ChatGPT, saying that this is fair use of using this for training material. And there's a great article on The Verge today about it. And the whole concept is, like, Drew, when you read a book, if you get inspired and get an idea based on the book, and we know ideas cannot be copyrighted, but I mean, is that fair use of the book that you read? Is that what these machines are doing? Is that what they're doing when they generate content? So is it really fair use? And that's going to be the key question when it comes down to the courts.
And it will probably take a while to shake out. The model, it may fall as photography, and photographs could not be copyrighted for several decades after the invention of the camera. It took 20 or 40 years for the Supreme Court to decide that photographs could be copyrighted, because it was originally interpreted to be just a mechanistic representation of reality, that there was no human activity involved in pressing a shutter. It took several decades for them to realize that no, a photograph of a portrait has some creative human activity in it. And if you've ever used ChatGPT to write an elaborate prompt and you get something back you're impressed with, you may not appreciate the Copyright Office saying, there's nothing copyrightable here. We're going to have an ally in this if you would hope that things would be copyrightable. The corporations are going to make sure that the materials their corporate AIs generate are going to be copyright protected. So it's not going to be genealogists paying for this fight. It's going to be corporations paying to make sure that their AI's material is copyrightable and the images that they generate are able to be protected by copyright. But it may take years, decades, I don't know.
Yeah, I want to go back to what Drew was talking about with brainstorming. And that's one of the ways I have also, even a call for presentations or something, just asking it to brainstorm and give a list of ideas. Another thing is I was this summer creating a new presentation and I asked it to give me an outline, and it was amazing. And I did not use that outline. That is not what people ended up seeing, but it saved me time. Steve has talked I take a class with him, and he's talked about, we're paying $20 a month, a lot of us, for ChatGPT, and how quickly you can gain that money back. So if I was going to sit there and say, okay, what can I talk about? Here's my topic. So I'm going to brainstorm and be listing all these ideas. That takes a lot of time and effort. And for it just to throw those things at me, and then I printed it out. And as I worked, some of it got used. I added things. I didn't talk about things. But it was a better use of my time to just get that started. I will say, so recently I wrote a blog post. I wrote a few about artificial intelligence. And in one of them, I asked ChatGPT to explain a concept. And so I actually quoted his whole, 2 paragraphs. And I said, this is from ChatGPT. But I was like, in his own words, he's explaining to us whatever the concept was. So, yeah, there's so much you can do that, again, piggybacking on what multiple people are saying, but a lot of it is we have accepted what Word has given us for many, many years. Most of us use Grammarly or something like that, and we don't credit that. Even if you were writing a paper, Steve, you were talking about, and it's supposed to be your own work, I think is what you said. We still haven't built into Word. It's going to correct your spelling. It's going to correct your punctuation at times. There's some basic things. And so we very rarely just type anything, and it's just truly all us. Even for many, many years, it's not been that way. So this is going to be a huge discussion, not just among genealogists, but amongst the world. We're hearing it in the college world too. So that's also interesting, because I have a daughter in college. I have a niece. I have a sister-in-law who's a dean at a school. And then there was a girl here, a young lady in high school that was part of our DNA roundtable yesterday. But hearing the differences among colleges on whether they're saying, nope, you can't do it. And it's like, that's going to be such a disservice. They're going to be out in the real world in a couple of years. And this is their future. This is the world they're going to be in. And others, I mean, they're having to figure it out, but we're all having to figure it out together. And it's going to be a long haul kind of thing. But we also have to do it quickly because it's here. We've got to figure it out. So.
Excellent. I'm going to throw this question out real quick here. When do you suppose we will use AI on WikiTree? I know that we're open to it. I cannot make those decisions, so I'm going to throw it out there. If Chris Whitten happens to be watching in the chat, maybe he will comment on that and we can answer that one a little bit later. So let's see. Doug asks, is AI power currently available to take the 1850 to 1950 census enumerations for a given place and create connected networks of people?
You'd probably have to break it into steps. But if you started to talk to it, imagine, Doug, that you were just talking to a very smart genealogist and computer programmer, and just start having the conversation. Start with the big picture. I have this data. How could I get to this endpoint? And if you go into the beta version of ChatGPT called Advanced Data Analysis and Code Interpreter, and you have some of this information that you can give it, it will start to design for you processes and steps to do these things. I've used it to write probably 24 small program scripts that are probably only of use to me, but some of them are not. I've noticed that Willie's put already some transcription things on there. Being able to transcribe audio and video is going to be huge. But already, if you've just got a modicum of programming ability, or just even a little bit of an idea of how a programmer may do something, you can start talking to advanced data analysis in natural language. And it never gets it right the first time, but when it gives you an error, you show it the error and it will help you debug your own scripts. And in short order, what used to take me 6 hours to do, because I'm not a very good programmer, Rob and Willie could do what takes me 6 hours. They could do it in 20 minutes or 2 minutes. But I'm able to get done now in 40 minutes what used to take me 6 hours.
And I was actually going to say,
that's just
even I is like, I'm not a big Python person, but I've actually been using ChatGPT to do a lot of Pythons. And that beta version, there's oftentimes exactly what you said. You feed it the information. I want you to analyze this document, whether it's hopefully you have it in a CSV format. I've noticed if it has it in that format. I've actually uploaded my a SQLite database and asked it questions about that database. And it's not so much you have to be a programmer, you have to be logical. But even I uploaded, just for the heck of it, I uploaded a SQLite database and said, there's a column in there called surname. Do I have any surnames in this database with Warthin? And it went out and it showed me, I actually had it shown to work. It created the Python script that opened up the SQLite database, did the select statement, and actually, I mean, I could do that, but why should I? If I'm doing quick and dirty, and it was very interesting, and it gets you started on a lot of things. The other thing I did was I was actually I had a concept and I was playing with that concept, build me this little graph and stuff like that. And it created in Python, and I kept changing it. And that's exactly what you're saying is you look at the results and you say, well, I'd much rather have it do this or that, or what if you took this into account? And it's not even you're telling it what to do. Can you take this into account? Can you take that into account? And it created this really nice little graph for me. And then I said, well, convert it to C#. And it created a perfectly reasonable conversion. Now, again, I had to fix it and I had to correct it and do a lot of those things. But the pieces that it gave, and it wasn't me being a programmer, it was me being logical, which sometimes is one and the same. But a lot of people can do that. And just like you said, being linguistic, saying the right words, being precise in what you're asking for really can help sometimes.
Yeah, I think there's one way to think about some of the advantages that these AIs and LLMs give us is that we trade one type or amount of work for another, right? And so something that was, in this particular case, creating these connected networks, people might have been a 40-hour task, right? If you were to sit down and you do it yourself and you go through, and now you sort of can plug in some data and ask some questions. And it's not free, because what you're trading it for is like, you originally used to have this work, and now what you do is you have verification and checking work that you have to do. So now it's maybe, it used to take you 40 hours, but it would have been perfect. Now it can do it instantaneously, but it takes you an hour of verification or checking, right? Which is still a great trade, right?
Yes.
And there's so many areas, particularly with like tough problems, where the trade is absolutely positive for you, but it's just important to know going into it that you're probably not going to throw the data in and be able to blindly accept what comes out. It's just the work of verifying and checking is probably going to be far less than the overall body of work from before.
I would go back to Doug's question. I think the issue is not so much the AI power, but the availability of the data in to the engine to do it. And I could see that, yes, you could, if you had availability of the data, the transcriptions of the 1850 to 1950 censuses for a given place, and you would have to define what that is, but that it would be, you probably could generate one of those really cool network graphs like Steve showed us to some degree, but you would also get a better one if you could also incorporate vital records, if you could also incorporate newspaper stories that would, like obituaries that indicate how people are related to each other, or, and who's been a pallbearer for whom. And that's where I think it's simply going to come down to, what does the AI have access to that can construct these things? So I think it's going to be a little bit limited until we reach some point where this data is somehow made available to us to feed in.
And also prep the data. I mean, the old county name versus the new county name, enumeration districts that, split off into other enumeration districts, questions that are on 1950 census that weren't on 1850, so it's a matter of prepping that data as well. Ewan, is it possible to talk about bias in AI?
Yes, go for it.
So I don't know if that's a concern of anyone on the panel. I keep seeing that pick up, in terms of my feed. I think I go through 200 articles a day right now on AI alone, through Feedly and everything. But that is a concern. Like if I were to say, Dana, in terms of the images, I have a Jewish ancestor. Would I need to say that they were Ashkenazi versus Sephardic in terms of, the features and skin tone and everything? Is there a bias right now in terms of generating certain data, and how is it skewed, of course, based on the training data? I want to get perspective from someone like Steve or Willie too, in terms of what you've seen.
I want to say one thing on that. So somebody else was trying to create an image they live on the East Coast and had something to do with Native Americans. And they were trying to create this image, and they actually shared a few that turned out kind of silly. And they said they realized they couldn't use Native American, they had to use Indian. So we're getting a lot of feedback from somebody, or not feedback, sorry. Anyway, so I created the prompt and said I wanted 3 Indian women near the seashore, and they have corn in their basket and all this. And I even said it was in Maryland, which is where this lady was working. And I got one picture that was beautiful, and the other one, it actually had people from India. So when you're talking about Jewish, yes, you probably have to be kind of specific. And it's sometimes, I mean, I've heard people also talk about bias and say, basically, they just get white people when they make a prompt or something, which has not been my experience in Dolly. I get a lot of variety. So I'm not sure. I mean, I don't think we all get the same experience or something, but I am seeing variety, although some of the variety, you see certain populations that are represented the same way over and over and over, instead of a variety realizing that they also have variety. So
I've noticed that too. What we're seeing is an attempt by OpenAI, the creators of ChatGPT, to try to mitigate. They know their training data is biased. They know that it's overrepresented of certain populations. Too many white guys, not enough people from the rest of the world. The same with language. And so try to mitigate that. Right now, when you use DALL-E 3, you're actually using two AIs. You type in your initial prompt, and GPT-4 takes your short, if you give it 10 words, show me an image of a family reunion set in Virginia, and you give it a short prompt like that, it expands it to about 100, 150, 200 words. And if you look closely, and it'll then feed that to DALL-E 3 as 2 or 3 or 4 different prompts, it will add diversity into the prompt at that point. It will actually say, include a person of this gender or ethnicity or heritage. And so those are guardrails that they have put in to try to mitigate the bias in their image data, so that it's not just all white men. And you do see it, Dana, you're not imagining the repetition, because they seem to have a set of stock characters that they're sprinkling into their image generation that, I'm assuming a good faith effort to mitigate the bias. They're sprinkling in a population of diversity. So that's how they're trying to address that kind of bias. There's so many others. The English language, where those of us who speak English, or like me, try to, we're lucky. Most of the training data was English. If you were, Spanish, French, German, you're going to be okay too. But the smaller languages are much more, not as well represented, and the quality of what you get is going to be in proportion to how much training data. So, with the English, it had a lot of training data. With Navajo, maybe not so much, and so your expectations and your results are probably going to be a lot less.
I want to follow up, if I may, on Steve's comments, only because Steve knows all this as a librarian. Is that librarians have been dealing with the bias issue for decades and decades and decades, because we know our library classification is biased, and we know that, and there are people who work on this all the time trying to fix it. Although I will say, while I'm sure it's better than it may have been, that is something you almost cannot eliminate, because classification by itself is a biased process. It involves human beings trying to decide, does this fit into this category or that category? And I mean, I can give all kinds of interesting examples, but I think you get it. Is that this is a problem with manipulating information, and AI itself is going to have to deal with the same things that librarians and the rest of us have been dealing with, just searching for things in the catalog. And most of you know that when you search for Google things, there's going to be bias in that too. When you Google things, that you get certain things and not other things because of just the way it's constructed. So yes, it is a problem, and there's no immediate solution. Doesn't mean we shouldn't look for one, but I don't think we can improve it. We'll probably never be able to eliminate it because it's just the nature of language.
So there's been a couple follow-up questions to that. Wouldn't that create other problems, like inserting diversity when there wasn't any, say, a 16th century small Dutch village?
Yeah,
that'd be a good experiment. You should try that and just see what happens.
Yeah.
Guard against presentism.
Yeah, I actually was, again, trying to illustrate my own family. So I had early Kansas settlers in the late 1860s, right around 1870. And so I was wanting to generate an image to tell a story. And I was saying, have this Kansas settler, and describing it all. And, at this point, we were getting 4 images. Now we're usually getting 2 right now when we do DALL-E 3. And it came back with an African-American. And I believe, I don't remember, the other one is from India or something else. But I mean, settlers were basically white at that time in Kansas. So it was trying to create diversity when that wasn't really appropriate.
Interesting. Let's see. Murray asked, can we train AI to be Hegelian in its approach to data analysis?
I'll ask, what's Hegelian?
I don't know.
Thank you, Rob. Rob takes the hit for the panel.
Murray, tell us what Hegelian is, and we'll try and answer.
On the next episode of AI Jeopardy, yes, Alex, I'll take
Hegelian
data for 100.
So we'll just.
I googled it. It's a philosophical term, but I still didn't really understand it from what I just read. So I don't.
Maybe Murray will let us know what he's talking about. Here's one. How hard will it be to learn AI for those who aren't techie? And I would follow that up with, for folks that are just starting to get into the whole AI world, what's a good way for them to get started without scaring them off completely?
Do it.
Well, I mean, it goes back to all the things we've done. You know, how hard would it be for people to learn how to use computers, how to use PCs, how to use the internet, how to use the World Wide Web, how to use DNA? I mean, it all depends. Yes, it depends on those of us in the business of preparing books and articles and tutorials to help. It's also going to depend a lot on the motivations and the interests of those who want to learn it. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say there's a learning curve, just as I know there was with DNA, and I know there was with using the web and using computers. And it is possible, it is doable. I don't want to scare anybody off, but just be aware up front. There's a learning curve. And if you're motivated and you're really interested, you can manage it. But it is going to depend on a lot of us out here who have dealt with it for a while, and the other folks on the panel who have been dealing with this for a while, to prepare educational materials to help teach it.
Yeah. Really, the big thing, and what I talk about when I started with DNA, take a small thing, try it, just do small things. Don't have this full expectation when you did your DNA. All of a sudden, you're going to build out a perfect tree. It takes a little bit of practice, and really, it's the first thing is to go out there. If you know how to really being able to Google things well is kind of the first steps. Although I find I go to Google and I start asking it questions, and it doesn't answer the questions the way that ChatGPT is. So I've been actually going to ChatGPT to ask it questions because that's really what it turns into. You're asking, for me, it's asking questions. And I know the prompts are always, they say, what kind of person who are you when you're starting to do the AI? So as a computer programmer, I want an application that will, a program that will do this. As a editor, I want you to review my document. Those are sort of some of the things. There's a lot of little things, but really just try it. ChatGPT is free right now. You can try and ask it some questions of something that you know or something that you don't know. I suggest something that you know, because that way you can more easily say whether or not it's being valid or not, and just experiment.
Yeah, my advice to someone like Kathy would be, you can try the free one. As Rob mentioned, it's free, but it's pumpkin spice latte season. For the cost of 2 or 3 pumpkin spice lattes, you can get a subscription to ChatGPT Plus for a month. $20. It'll be the best $20 you ever spend. You are going to be amazed. And if you haven't tried GPT-4, you haven't tried AI. There's a lot of the free ones out there, Bard and Claude, and even the free version of ChatGPT. But they are weak tea compared to what you get when you really. So here's my rule of thumb for folks like Kathy: 20 and 20. The $20 is going to be well worth it if you have a month where you're going to be able to spend 20 hours. It takes about 20 hours of use. Something clicks in the first 20 hours that people do this. It's not like you buy a history book for $20 and you put it on your shelf and it looks good. You've got to get in there and do it. It's more an experiential skill like tennis or swimming or a martial art. You've got to actually practice it for about 20 hours before it starts to click. Now, that's not techie. You don't have to be techie. If you can speak any human language, just start talking to it in any human language. My dad taught himself to use a computer playing solitaire. He didn't buy any technical books, but just by playing solitaire, he learned how to move the mouse. He learned how to navigate a window. So just start playing with it for the first 20 hours, even if you don't have a specific task. And something you will have the disorienting experience. When Drew talks about a learning curve, it's not the technical learning curve that shocks people. It's when it lies to you the first time, or it feels like you're going to feel misled, and you're going to feel like you've been knocked off your feet and you've lost your breath, like you've been pushed off a cliff. That's a temporary disorientation. It's a very new technology, and it's going to feel strange at first. But once you get to 20 hours, in that first $20, you will start to see, wow, this can be really helpful. But you're not going to get that. You might get that experience with the free versions. But if you want to say I've given this an honest try, you can't say you've given it an honest try on one of the free versions. There's something, a difference in degree became a difference in kind with GPT-4. And the experience of being able to chat with it like a text message makes it so easy and usable. It's not the technology that's going to intimidate people. It's the newness of it.
Steve, let me just really quickly say that, yes, being knocked off by your feet by it lying to you or whatever. You know, when you learn computers, the first time you ever experience a blue screen of death, I mean, that had to have been a big wake-up call for someone to go, oh, computers don't always work the way I expect them to. I need to learn that sometimes they fail, and maybe it's something I did, or maybe it's not. Maybe it's a bug in the software. And then you have to learn about bugs in software. And I mean, that's where I think that is. There's a learning curve for that when things don't go the way you expect them, it's not your fault. Yeah. It's really not. You need to go, yeah, I just have to learn how to deal with this particular issue.
Yeah, so I want to speak as, I think, the only one on the panel that's not a background in computer programming and IT or some field like that. So I want to say, first of all, what I learned. So I started playing with it back in March. And the first thing I learned, which at first I just put it aside because I was like, this is, you know, it hallucinated, but it is not Google. So do not think of it as Google. Do not, you know, just type in your search and expect to necessarily get truth out of it. The other thing is, so much of what we learn today and so much of what I've learned in the past 5 years is going to YouTube or somebody's blog or something and just searching for things. And I recommend you search for videos. So Steve Little he did a wonderful video for NGS, right? That is a great place to start. I've mentioned Coach Carol earlier. She has great ones. I've watched a lot of people who are outside of the genealogy community, but just play with it. You're not going to break it, and just see what it does. And it's like, again, DALL-E 3's been, you know, not very long at all, and we're all learning how to do it. But you just keep playing, and you get things, and you're like, wow, that's worse than ever. It's not doing what I wanted to do. And part of it's just a logic game. You just keep trying, or again, you go back to YouTube and you search and say, you know, how can I get it to do this? Or, you know, put in search terms. Or ask, there's a couple Facebook groups, Artificial Intelligence and Genealogy. I think is that the correct term, the correct name? That's a great one. You can ask questions there, but just start trying it. And again, remember, it's not Google. You're not treating it the same, but just talk to it. Even you can ask it to tell you how to do things. You can say, hi, can you tell me how do I ask you blah, blah, blah? And it will tell you how to do something. So just jump in and try it. It's amazing, and it's going to be around, and we're going to be using it. So have fun.
Absolutely. So speaking of fun, I just did exactly what Dana said not to do, just because I was curious. And I went to Perplexity AI and asked it Murray's question about Hegelian data. And so here's what it had to say about that. Just Murray, take it with, you know, grain of salt. Some researchers have explored the use of Hegelian philosophy in machine learning, such as examining types of abductive inference in Hegelian philosophy and machine learning from a formal comparative perspective. Others have used text paraphrasers to help AI understand Hegelian philosophy. However, it is still an open question whether AI can fully grasp the nuances of Hegelian philosophy and apply them to data analysis.
So that is where, since I didn't understand that, I will do again something I learned from Steve Little and say, explain it to me as if I'm a fifth grader. And it will dumb it down and it will make it in a way I can understand it. And that's actually what I had shared on my blog that one day, because I didn't understand some concept about ChatGPT. And I said, explain this to me like I'm a fifth grader. And you can do fifth grader. If you get that, you might try ninth grader or whatever. And but it's a great way to understand these harder concepts, but then you often still have to check it. But go ahead.
Oh, here's how it's said for a fifth grader. Artificial intelligence is when machines are programmed to do things that normally require human intelligence, like learning, problem solving, and decision making. Hegel was a philosopher who had ideas about the relationship between life and mind. Some people are studying Hegel's ideas to see if they can help make AI better. However, it's not clear if AI can be trained to think like Hegel.
Much more understandable.
Yeah.
And see, ChatGPT said that, so it must be true, right?
Absolutely. Don't fact check that at all. It's totally accurate.
It's been my experience that it's very good as a tutor, you know, through a sophomore in college. You can't get deep in the weeds. You can't ask it, you know, something that's only new in the past 5 or 10 years. But most of human knowledge is, you know, except for the stuff on the cutting edge, if you're asking it about stuff that's been around for 20 or 50 or 2,000 years, it can do a pretty good job explaining it to you at a high school or freshman or sophomore level in college. You know, you don't want to take any specific details without double checking it, but general concepts and as a tutor, it's really good.
Yeah, and to go back to when I first tried something, I was trying to ask it about some current events, and actually more specifically some current things in genetic genealogy world. And at the time, I didn't realize that it had a cutoff. Is it September 2021, I believe? And supposedly, and some of you can talk more about that, a week or so ago, supposedly we got up to the present. But mine is not up to the present, and I've even asked it, and it still keeps saying, I'm sorry, that might have happened before September 2021. So maybe it's not rolled out to everybody, but for those of you who don't know, that's part of it. If you try to ask it about like a conflict that's going on today or something, it may or may not. Again, mine for some reason is not up to date, but yeah, that's my experience.
So it may have lived under a rock for the last 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
COVID. So I'm going to throw this one out there just because I'm curious what your answers would be. But like, throw your imaginations wide open, and if you could have AI do something for you today, what is your like dream AI function or capability?
Facilitate collaboration.
Yeah.
So I think that one I have increasingly realized within genealogical research the importance of collaboration. It's a basic part of information literacy, which I'm actually working on an article with a colleague at USF about applying information literacy standards to genealogical research. And one of the things that is a big part now of that is that students doing research is not just about producing researching and finding answers or writing, but it's also finding people to collaborate with and to do work like that, because that's the real world. That is, we don't do genealogy, should not be doing genealogy in a vacuum all by ourselves, not talking to other researchers. We need to collaborate. And I would love AI to facilitate that, encourage me, kick me in the pants and say, you need to talk to this researcher that you haven't talked to, reach out to them, please.
So I'll share one of my dreams, and I don't think this one is actually that far down the line. So I recently went on my first trip to National Archives, and I've pulled, I think, 5 different pension files, and several of them are over 100 pages long. I would love to be able to feed that entire pension file in there, that it would transcribe it. It would then pull all important information, dates, people, what conditions this man had, everything, and make this nice, neat summary, and then quote from it, and even tell me, so the order of the pages, like on page 36, you can find this. So everything's there and everything's been pulled out. I mean, I guess that's part of the fun part of genealogy too, but if you've read through a pension file, it goes on and on about the same thing over and over and over and over. So I would love to be able to feed it just a massive, I mean, that's not even massive, but 100 pages of documents, and it to perfectly read it all and perfectly pull things out and tell me where I can look for the good stuff.
So I work for, my day job is work for the government contractor for Medicare, CMS. And there's already tools that do that for medical records and stuff. So it's really just a matter of really training, coming up with the right training model that should be able to pull that stuff out, I would think. But yeah, I think that's definitely very doable.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I guess I get the benefit from getting to peek a little bit into the future, and I think a lot of what's going to come with regard to AI is a lot of the stuff that I would normally wave a magic wand is like, it's actually not that far away. It just is a little bit of can we get the compute? Can we get the machines in place? Can we get the training data? And so a lot of the problems are going to be solved, right? Where AI can solve them. I think the thing that's going to be very hard is the capturing of intent, right? And so sometimes we talk about a proactive AI, right? Where, Drew, as you were saying, what I really want is not someone, it's kind of like when you hire an employee, right? If the employee only does exactly what you ask, right? That's a useful employee, but a better partner would be someone who's like, I'm going to anticipate what you're going to need in the future. And that's a really hard problem, right? Because it's a very messy, I mean, even we as people get it wrong all the time. And the thing, if I could wave that magic wand and solve a problem, it would be, I want the proactive AI. I want the person who can kind of understand who I am and anticipate where I'm going and get there before me and support me there. And it's that right now is, as far as I know, a fairly unsolved problem in terms of we don't know how we're going to get there.
It sounds really great, though.
Well, I think what you've brought up, though, is if we want intelligence, there's not just knowledge intelligence, there's emotional intelligence. Because that's part of being a human being. Is a good human being is to have emotional intelligence, to know not only things like what to advise, but to know how to present it in such a way that it's compassionate, to know when it should keep its mouth shut, to know when it should speak up. And as humans, it took us a lifetime to learn that. As children, we often said things that our parents regretted that we said in front of other people. And I think that's where AI is going to start off. And it's probably going to say things, well, hopefully not in front of other people, but may say things that we would rather it didn't say because it lacks emotional intelligence. And I'm not even saying it can develop that I don't know what degree it can develop that, but I guess that is going to be the part of the problem of intent that Willie's describing, is also knowing what we want and how we want it. How do we want it presented? You can have assistance, and sometimes you go, stop advising me. I'm okay. I know what I'm doing here. Stop giving me help, because it's also going to have to know when to shut up. And it's going to, at least for those of us who eventually don't want to hear about it. But yeah.
That reminds me of the little paper clip from Microsoft or a long, long time ago.
Clippy,
where it's finally like, stop. I'm good. Well, we have just a few minutes left. Do you have any final? I want to give you guys this minute to have any final thoughts, or.
I think this has been great. I think it's going to help dispel some misinformation out there, hopefully, about AI in general and genealogy. And not everything's going to be bright and shiny. Yeah. The thing is, we've highlighted some of the great parts, but that's what life is. Life is not always bright and shiny, and so I'm really excited about the possibilities, and I'm glad that Genealogy is hopping on this sooner rather than later. There was a big fight against social media, against webinars 15 years ago, and I think that hopefully we've learned our lesson as an industry about that.
Yeah, I want to say, so I'm so glad this panel was put together. And even just being this weekend, again, I'm at the FTDNA conference and talk to people. You hear some other people who are very excited about it, and we've had some great discussions, and some people who are quite fearful of it. And we've mentioned the term hallucination. I don't think maybe we necessarily described it for those who are newer, but that's when it kind of makes something, although it's not a brain doing that. So, but Steve said in our class again that the antidote to hallucination is feeding it the information, and that's a big thing. A good way to not let it just make something up is to feed it a document or something and say, stay true to this. Just use the information in this paper. Do not add to it. I'm not even thinking of all the correct words, but if you feed it that information, it's going to give you back more true information. So, I want people to not be so scared and to give it a try and to keep participating in these talks, and let's keep talking about it, because we all have to. This is a big learning curve we're all on, and we're on this journey. And you just be a part of the conversation, and don't, if you're here, you're hopefully at least interested, but maybe some of you are fearful. So I just want you to know, keep trying and stick with us, and we're going to figure out a way to make it where it's safe and where it's something that we can use and feel comfortable with how we're using it.
I would echo Dana's invitation and also acknowledge that, if you had an experience in the spring that was disorienting or upsetting, we didn't know where the mines in the minefield were in December and January and February. We know much better now the map to the minefield and how to stay out of trouble, what the limits are. And so Blaine Bettinger's Facebook group, Genealogy and Artificial Intelligence, that's the center of the universe right now for genealogy and this discussion. And there's over 5,000 people there ready to help you take the next steps. And so you don't have anything to be afraid of. You may experience a couple disorienting moments, but that's just life when you're learning something new. Few of us learn to ride our bicycles without a couple scraped knees. But then once you ride that bicycle the first time, you're having a blast. And this is going to be very helpful. So don't be afraid of a few scraped knees. There's lots of folks to help pick you up and get you back on.
I'm going to go ahead. Thomas just shared the link with me for that Facebook group. Let me go ahead and share that here in the chat comments for you guys. It's a great group. I've learned a lot from being in it for sure. And there's been a bunch of comments in the last few minutes from people saying they're not afraid anymore, or they're at least less afraid. So I think we've accomplished what we came here to do today. And I'm just thank you, all of you, for coming to chat with me. I've really enjoyed it and learned quite a bit. So with that, we'll just wrap it up, and you guys have a good day.
Okay, bye everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.